In a world of top down corporate structures where everyone is faking it until you make it, what happens when you introduce empathic leadership? The kind of leader who sees vulnerability, listening, and inclusion of different perspectives as strength, who holds such a safe space that conflict leads to better outcomes. Today's guest is Victoria Pelletier, a 20-plus year corporate executive, board director, #1 best-selling author, and professional public speaker whose focus is empowering people through whole human leadership. Join us to find out more.
Soul Nectar Show, the Soul Nectar Show. You're invited, delighted to discover who you are. Anything is possible if you believe. So join us on this beautiful journey. Soul Nectar Show, Soul Nectar Show.
Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Soul Nectar Show, that show where we talk about all things essence, where we gather around the campfire as our ancestors before us, and we share our stories of connection to that which is greater than us, to the big mystery beyond the veil, to those synchronistic moments that lead us inexorably to a deeper understanding of who we are and what we're doing here on Mother Earth, and having our life experiences all together, seeing things through all the many different facets of the diamond, and doing our best to walk in our own personal alignment and integrity, and also respect other people's journeys. And today's conversation, I feel in my heart, is going to be so powerful for anyone who's wondering how to show up in the world today, with all the division and conflict and polarization, and it feels like projections flying around all over the place. And how can we stay in our own lane? How can we actually just stay in our own lane, process what we need to process, while letting everybody else be who they are, and respect them and respect their journey of life and learning and discovery? And really, in that way, I think we can build so much unity around this idea of respecting each other, and also doing our own inner work on whatever's coming up out there that is challenging in here, and being so accountable for that inner work, that we don't need to project it out onto anyone else. And I feel like I've got a really great person for this conversation today. Victoria Pelletier is with us. Welcome, Victoria.
Thanks for having me. I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, super excited to have you on the show. Victoria is someone who really has done a lot of public speaking around this idea of the whole human leadership, being an empathic and authentic leader, as well as the importance of personal branding, your impact on professional growth, and the power of DEI. And I know that's like turned into some kind of word you're not supposed to say. I don't know, diversity, inclusion, including other people, having equity, respecting people. I'm still going to have that conversation on Soul Nectar Show because that's the truth. And that's how we work together. That's how we build resilient cultures, whether it's the corporation, whether it's your family system, whether it's our society, whether it's the world. This is, I believe, foundational to the importance of a good life. And as being a person of integrity, learning how to, do that inner shadow work yourself, and not like be projecting it all over everybody. And I see so much projection in the world today, and I've even done it myself in moments of frustration. So I completely understand it. But how do we step out of that? And so I'm really, really excited to have you on the show, Victoria, today, to really guide us, through this conversation, how to be unstoppable, how to be dynamic, how to lead. And then what do you do with all those projections? And how do you respect the people that are, sort of with you on the journey? So I don't know where you want to start, but like, how did you, I guess, get into this idea that this is what you wanted to focus your life on?
I I I think some of it was I grew up with an amazing mother, but who, taught me so much about how great the world was in embracing diversity. So I thank her for that. And then I think more from like a corporate standpoint, that just became like embodied in who I am as a human and how I show up in all facets, as you said, not just a workplace and the community, the world at large. I took my first executive role at a very young age, and it was in an environment. It was in a contact center outsourcing environment, and those in North America are typically not like destination jobs, right? People come into those jobs because they're unemployed, underemployed, they're new immigrants to the country, they're tough. And I think this was even like 25, 26 years ago when telemarketing was still much of a thing, and that was one of the toughest jobs you could have. And I stepped into this organization as their chief operating officer, 6,000 or so people. Our turnover was massive. And I was like, that's going to be somewhat natural because of the environment, but what can I do to create an environment where people want to stay a little bit longer for the time that they're there, they're happier, they're more productive. And it was such an incredibly diverse like workforce. Again, lots of new immigrants to the country. I'm originally from Canada, and this was in Toronto, huge like multicultural city. And I had this moment walking into like the staff lunchroom where people were bringing in their foods from their home countries. And someone made a comment about being somewhat embarrassed by how it might smell. And I just thought like, no, like proudly, you do you. Like I want to create this sense of belonging. And as a young queer woman myself, I was the youngest executive by probably 20 years. I was the only female executive, openly, queer woman. I was married to a woman at that point. Now happen to be married to a man, but I'm still very openly queer. I felt that, although great privilege as a white woman born in Canada. And so I'm like, how do I do this? How do I create this environment? And so I was doing it because I felt like an outsider in many ways, but I wanted to create the safe place for the colleagues that I was working with. And it had great benefit on them as humans, but also on the business. So that I'm like, well, this should just be the way we always operate. And I've lived, Kerri, with that ever since. And it's just become like so innate to who I am, how I show up. And as you said, sort of in the intro, like it's like talking DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion is like negative words in North America these days. We don't need to have the political conversation, but like I stand so firmly behind it because I just believe fundamentally creating this safe space and a sense of belonging is so important for all of us.
Yeah, and these days, I'm hearing your heart, and I share that with you, that desire that every person gets honored for their journey, right? Like I see it as a soul's journey. That's my lens. I see it through. And I see it as, the long arc of the soul. We come through many, many, many lifetimes in different skins, in different cultures, in different environments, in different lessons. And we're learning a lot, through each one of those incarnations. And and so yeah, like sometimes we forget that picture and then we only remember this current lifetime. And when we get into a moment of polarity and like there are some people, for example, in white skin that want everybody else to conform to their idea of the world, very different than what you said. And then there's people like you and me that are more open and more like curious about how do we create a society that's equitable. We see the ladder, we see the color ladder, we see the privilege, we see all that. How do we break it down? How do we step forward into a new reality where everyone's more equal on the same playing field, And but sometimes there's projections all over the place. And so you can be, just by how you show up and look, can be thrown into a category that you really don't inside yourself feel like you're belonging to. It's frustrating as a leader. I don't know how, if you've contended with that. Like how do you let someone know who you are, when there's that projection field going on?
I think the way I've demonstrated it is by being incredibly authentic and vulnerable about who I am and the experiences that I've had and what makes me the human I am today. I'm A type, I'm driven, I'm competitive, like, but there's things that contributed to like me wanting to get there, and a big part of that was some of my own lived experience, my desire to be better than the biology of I'm adopted. So the biological, family or mother in particular, who was very abusive to me before I was adopted. It's that I grew up in a lower socioeconomic home from my adoptive family. And so me sharing that openly, which I didn't, that was a mistake I made early in my career. I was worried about, I didn't want people to think I was weak. I didn't want people to feel sorry for me. So I didn't share that. But the power that came from starting to share that story, it created that like the psychological safety. It created that just safe space for people to, feel that they could show up and be their whole self. So that's been the greatest way I've been able to introduce that is just by being me openly with others to allow them to feel like they can do the same.
I love that. And it's that personal accountability, right? Like when you're walking in the world in and because even like yes, in white skin there is privilege. From a feminine body of I don't care what color, you're automatically challenged, right? Like you're automatically at the disadvantage in the world as it's been constructed today. And so I feel like that we can join together on that part, like across, with women to say, hey, we're all in this together and we want to create a new world. How do we do that? And part of how we do that, I have learned in my own journey, and I just got to guess you've learned it in yours, is that we hear everyone's perspective, right? So we might hear perspectives that are challenging to our bodies, to our minds, to our sensibilities. But I think that open sharing of perspectives is really key to this. I mean, has that been your experience as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I learned by not being this. I mean, I feel like I was all like I've always I learned a great deal of empathy. Again, my mother was probably it was my greatest teacher in that regard, but the demonstrating vulnerability and being as open as I am was just something I didn't do. And it wasn't until like I did that the world opened up for me, and I just saw the power that came in the connection, the trust that was built with people. So I try to be like that in all facets. Like I write on things like personal branding, and I tell people like this isn't this caricature you build of yourself, this false image of filters that we see in this very social media world. There is no different version of Victoria in real life versus the digital version. Other than, you might catch me at the gym wearing like a stupid shirt that's got a saying or has a swear word on it. I might not post that on my LinkedIn, but otherwise it's still the smart ass version of Victoria in both places with sometimes just different visuals.
Yeah, and I love that because what you're speaking to is like the mask of perfection, right? As a leader, oftentimes what we feel the projections, right? We feel automatically if you step into leadership of any kind, you're gonna, and motherhood is another form of leadership, right? But as we step into a leadership role, whether it's in the family or whether it's in society in general, we're gonna feel that projection field come in on us, right? So that can make us want to put a mask on, right? And I've seen this so much, like all over the spiritual leadership world, where people put this mask on and like they're running across the beach with their hair, blowing in the wind and acting as if life is perfect now that I've found my spiritual path and I can show you the way there. And I always was like, that is such crap. Like, I don't believe a second of that because my own spiritual journey, I'm 50, going to be 57, that has not been like that. It has been trench work. It has been gritty. It has been difficult. It has pushed me. It has made me, reveal parts of myself I didn't accept. Right. And I'm hearing you say, like, you're just that whole self all the time, everywhere, obviously a little bit of metering for like places like LinkedIn where there's different expectations, right? But like you really try to do your best to show up as you are. Did I hear that right? Like, is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. And um, I, I walk my talk as well. And so I show up authentically in every format, in every venue in which you'll meet me, whether that's digitally or in person. But what I say, I do, I live, I believe. And so I think that that's a very big part of it as well. Like there's not it's not just about a different version of myself. Like, the advice I give to others, for the most part, there's been a few like I tell people to make sure they don't work on the vacation. I'm not one who does that. That's a do as I say, not as I do. But when it comes to things like values, ethics, and my commitment to people, I walk the talk consistently.
It's hard to do that too, because there's moments where I just, as a leader myself, where somebody brings something, right? And it might be about me, right? Like as the teacher, like there could be a reflection about me that they want to offer, that they've sort of placed me as a placeholder of this whatever archetypal energy is going on inside of themselves, and they feel some resonance. And then my question is always, do I feel a resonance? Like, is this landing? Because if it's landing in me and I'm feeling it, then it's mine too. And if I'm not, then it's kind of like, oh, interesting. Okay, how do I help this person, shift? But that's the willingness to look within and not immediately defend. And we have these mental defenses because we don't want to feel rejected, or we don't want to feel wrong. And then the more we got, identity invested in our path, right, that mask can really come over, and you have to keep tearing it down, right? You have to keep challenging it.
You do. I think there's a big part, like I talk around just a way to develop resilience. And but I think this applies to many things as we think about like our own personal development. And a significant part and one of the steps in that is this incredible amount of like self-awareness and self-reflection, so that then you can start to model the thoughts, the language, the behaviors that move you forward. And so that's something I spend a lot of time with, like, is reflecting on, like, when I have an emotion, or I have an instinct to act a certain way that I don't think is the path that will take me exactly where I want to go. I just sit with it and understand why. Like, what's contributed to this? Do I have a fear? Do I have some anxiety? Do I have something in the past that caused me to feel this way? And then I can take action in terms of how am I going to change my thought process along this, or how do I take a baby step? It might be uncomfortable towards the actions that move me in that positive direction.
Yeah, I think I'm just thinking as you're talking about this, it feels to me like you had such a great mentorship with your mother. Like it feels like she was someone who helped you to work through identity issues, right? We all face identity issues, but we either have a parent that guides us through the identity issues, or we have a parent that wasn't there and was neglectful, or we have a parent that suppresses our exploration of our identity, or is cruel in some way that we hide ourselves. And so it depends on, I really think the modeling of our parents is so important to the development of our intrinsic ability to have empathy, because empathy ultimately is being able to hear different perspectives and allow all of that to be part of the same story, right? It's a nuance. It's like my perspective is true, and this perspective of this person is true, and this perspective, right? But that inclusivity, is challenging if you didn't have the kind of parenting that guided you through your own mental defenses, right? And when we have early childhood wounding, like from a abusive parent or an environment, that those defenses really kick up, right? And so sounds like, what were some of the things that your mom did, like, that really pulled you out of, you know, defense and into empathy?
Yeah, I wish I will say, Kerri, I wish I appreciated it more when I was younger. I think it was as I became a more mature adult, I appreciated and respected what she did for me. So I'll just say, so again, I'm born to a drug addicted teenage mother who was very, very abusive to me. I spent the first 4 years of my life with her in and out of like child welfare system. And then she would often give me to the woman that ended up adopting me, who then insisted like that she take me away. So the most loving thing my biological mother did was agree when asked to give me up to for adoption to my adoptive parents. My but I was hardened as a kid, right? Like I mean, suffering very physical and emotional abuse at the hands of the person who's supposed to like love you the most. And so I was insecure. I was like tough. I was hardened. I was fearful of being given away again. So like that's just the dynamic of where I was coming from, and the young child that my mom had to work with. And so for her, it was, I was quick to like push them away, or anyone, if I got into an uncomfortable situation. I'm like, well, I'm going to push you away before you have that opportunity to do that with me. I don't think I loved and believed in myself. So my mom would sit me down, and it's a weird place she would do it. We would do it in the bathroom, and she'd have me sit on the edge of the bath, and just talk to me. And she's like, Tori, my nickname growing up. She's like, why? Like, why? I need you to understand. And it was just over and over again. She wouldn't let me up and out of there until like we'd kind of talk through it and process. And inevitably, some tears came, and I hated it. And her pushing me to think about, like, no, understand why, what's causing you like that. And so it drove me nuts. And and it was a bit difficult. My mom, it turned out, as a later as a teenager, like it was a bit difficult. She turned out to have, at the time, they might call it something different today, BPD or whatever, but manic depressive disorder. So it was actually very tumultuous still in that. And so I moved out I was barely 17 years old, when I went off to university, and I never moved back. And she was very unhealthy. She smoked 2 packs of cigarettes a day, and died in my early 20s. And I wish I could have thanked her for that and told us, you don't make me cry. Told her how much I appreciated it because it was sort of like as I became a mom, and as I got a little bit more mature and comfortable with like who I was, and I started to really love myself, that I've reflected back on all that she had done and the tool set she gave me to sit in my discomfort, and my anxiety and talk through it and understand. And then, I sign a lot of my social media posts with 2 hashtags. One is unstoppable. I am. But the other is no excuses. And I mean that not in the most negative of ways. I just mean like you have a choice in how you're going to move forward. But I think you need to do that hard work of like reflection and awareness. And sometimes that means surrounding yourself with people who are going to call you on your BS, who will identify the blind spots you are not seeing, and then potentially helping you work through that. Whether that's a loved one, or maybe that's just a professional, who can help you with that.
I love that. And I thank you for sharing your heart too. And I love that. I had to do a lot of work to heal what I call the mother wound. And I wrote a whole book about that. Love is Fierce, Healing the Mother Wound, during which I basically for 2 years did ceremony and went deep dive into my projections of my mother, right? And because my parents were, my parents' solution was to put me on a sailboat with them, a 24-foot sailboat, so not a big one. Okay, there was no escaping. There was no other place to go. You're trapped for the whole week. Imagine this, people trapped for the whole weekend with your parents on a sailboat every week. And if there's no wind, you're just like sitting there.
Mhm.
While everyone's reading a book and or playing card games at night. That was
Yeah.
my entire high school time. While other kids were going to parties, I was on the sailboat with my parents. And same thing, I hated it. I was so like railing against it. I just wanted to get away. And my senior year, my youngest brother, my stepdad, he was my stepfather, his younger son came to live with us my senior year. He couldn't stand it either. And he would go in the dinghy, like, and we'd like push him way out behind the boat on a rope so he could get some space, because it's a lot. It's really intense when you're like trapped with your family on a boat. But the beautiful thing about it is like I see it in retrospect. And even now that I'm studying and guiding people through the Venus sequence, which not everybody knows about, but Richard Rudd, the gene keys, it's a beautiful system of self-discovery. And the Venus sequence is when you go back up through your life, back to the core wounds, all the way to the womb of your mother, and even the womb of your grandmother, because that's actually where you were formed, all the way back, and then you heal it. Well, in the mental body development happens 14 to 21. That's called
Mm.
the IQ in the gene keys sequence. And I've been doing more deep research into it. And this is where mental defense gets formed. And so if you do not have someone challenging you on your assumptions, willing to sit with you, willing to fight with you over it, willing to talk you through it, willing to force you to look at it, if you don't have that, you don't get that mental defense doesn't ever get dissolved. It actually gets fortressed. And then you live like your whole life as a 16-year-old because you don't know how to challenge your own assumptions, right? I guess a lot of people call it critical thinking, but you don't know how to do that. So if you don't know how to do that, you can't really see something from somebody else's perspective. You can't actually put yourself in their shoes to understand them. But when you've had somebody willing to sit with you through the fire, like your mom did, as much as you hated that experience, it helped you to dissolve some of those mental defenses so you could actually stand in someone else's shoes and see their perspective, which makes you a great leader, because you're not forcing them to see yours. You're actually listening to theirs, which is feminine leadership, right? I don't know if you want to say any words about that, but I feel like we're experiencing some top down forcing right now from an unhealthy paradigm. And there's a different paradigm that's grassroots that's growing that I feel in leaders like yourself, that's feminine leadership.
Yeah, I personally don't love talking about masculine and feminine traits because I think we all possess both.
Yeah.
And some that are characterized as feminine, I don't think should be, because then I think there's this sort of toxic masculinity where they feel like they shouldn't embrace the traits. So that's just me personally. I just think that there's incredible skills and traits that we all as humans should embrace and bring, and at different volumes of them at different times depending on the situation. But so for me there's a level of empathy and understanding and like a way in which we should be communicating with one another that needs to be different than it has been in the past. And you're right, like I entered the workforce and it's command and control. It was very top down, thou shalt do this, just simply because they sit higher on the hierarchy than someone else, rather than and yes, that should still exist, by the way. Like there is a hierarchy for a reason, but like the ability to create a place for comfortable discord and challenge. Like I want people to do that. And so my approach, you're right, Kerri, it's not been like you're having this experience because this was mine, but in the way in which I choose to often have, like even in tough performance conversations, I had a leader, he was reporting to me, and I could see some of his behavior, and I thought it was because of insecurity. Like he would make sure that everyone knew he was an executive in our organization. He led with his title. And so I said, here is my journey to like becoming an executive. So early, I felt a lot of this. I felt insecure. So I showed up with this mask, no vulnerability, no emotion. Like, and I think just by telling him this is what I experienced, and like I was doing that, not automatically saying this is why you're doing it, but like just but creating that kind of opportunity. And again, in this case, I'm sharing vulnerability. And here's some mistakes I made and how I learned from them, but I learned why I was doing it. Now let me talk to you about how people are experiencing you in our workplace. And let's try and understand how we move you to a different place. And I think because I started like with that conversation around what I'd learned in my own personal, that again, it created a little bit of like safety for him. And without telling him, I need you to go sit and reflect, like and figure this out. Like that was sort of where I brought him along to. Now I will say he was a little slower to get there, so in a subsequent conversation I needed to be a little bit more direct with him on on that.
Yeah.
But but I think it was like, and so I think that's the kind of, you might call it sort of like feminine leadership, but I just think it's this empathetic, transparent, just very human way in which we can communicate that builds the connection to help us move forward.
Yeah, and I think it happens when we embrace our flaws, like you said, like when we admit our mistakes or we say, "Oh, I've been there, totally been there. I think I see this." And then I like to ask, like, "Are you open to a reflection?" Now, if you're working for somebody, obviously you're kind of in a situation where you kind of have to take it in a way. But I feel like what maybe works better sometimes is when people are in the invitation, right? Because I think I think there's a we can also make a lot of misrepresentations, like you said, like you made some assumptions or you had some intuition that said you thought you knew what he was experiencing. But like also sometimes we don't have a reference point. Like if someone's having a journey that's so different than ours that we really don't know where to begin, then we got to start with them, right? Like sharing their experience. And as a mom, I know you faced a little bit of this, right? And um how do you support somebody who's going through a really big transition in their life, and maybe you haven't been through the same transition? How do you find that, that point of commonality?
Yeah, being a mom is definitely one of the most challenging roles I've held, and held some like big executive ones, and I've been through tons of mergers and acquisitions and corporate restructure. But I will tell you, being a mom challenges me every day, even now as my children are adults. They one, I actually think some of my own lived experience has created. Um, I'm not going to say intimidation, but like my youngest one, suffers with some mental health challenges, and often reflects back and is like, "Mom, but you dealt with all this and you're fine now." And I'm like, "We're different humans," like, and so I trying to put him into a good space. Like there is only so much you can do, and I can share what's worked for me, what my experiences have been, but they're not going to work for everyone. And so I think a little bit as you've just described in terms of like creating the space for people and recognizing what was true for me in this case might not be true or might not be the path for others, even then when that's my own children. And so, how can you I mean, it's about doing our best. My goal and my vision for my kids is could I raise two happy, healthy humans that are successful in whatever their version of success is. Because my level of success has created undue pressure, I think, for them to feel like they need to achieve it. And so also supporting them and to make sure that, as long as you're happy, healthy, and you've afforded the lifestyle that you want, then that is success.
I love that you just said that. I often feel that too. It creates a pressure, right? It creates a pressure sometimes on our kids when the mom is perceived as successful or has a certain kind of power, in her presence or in her knowing. Because I feel like as I look out, I see that there's been some conditioning that women be a certain way, like soft and nurturing and supportive and diminished and allow, being like the background, the wallpaper, the, sort of always there, but not necessarily um out front, right? And so when you are a woman who's out front, as you clearly are, then that it creates a different dynamic with the kids.
Hmm. Yeah, it does. It does. And I mean, everyone's different. I think I look at I sometimes think I'm like nature versus nurture. Like if I in this, so my two children are actually two different donors' fathers. So again, I was married to a woman before and I gave birth to my children in that relationship. So my older son's donor was a known donor, but he moved out of town and wasn't available when we wanted to have a second one. So my second one is an anonymous donor. And so although their DNA isn't, it's 50% of it is the same, but nurture. They grew up in the same environment, right? And I sometimes I look and I'm like, oh my goodness, if I hadn't given both birth to both of them, I'd like wonder, like it. I just think that's human nature. And so like, they're, so like me yet so different in other ways. And so I just think, like how can we do our best to again support them, give them the tools. So this is me as a parent, but it's actually how I approach the workforce as well. Like what can I do to give people the tools and the support to be their best version of themselves and perform in a way in a business context that aligns to the outcomes that we need to achieve from a business standpoint, but from a parenting standpoint that aligns to the outcomes they want to, achieve as human beings themselves.
Yeah, and I think you just said something pivotal without saying it. And the blue note of what you said is that you actually are looking to that person and saying, how can I empower you to have your version of success so that your gifts are shining and your life is fulfilled, and what is it about you that needs to come forward? Because a lot of times when you are strong like you are and you're up on stage and you did the TED talk, and when people are attracted to you, right, Victoria, they go, oh my gosh, she's so strong, and there can be like this little hero worship, like I want to be just like you, and they like show up and want to, I've done this to my mentors, where my first real feminine mentor, I was like, oh, like I was just like watching and I'm probably sitting there like, to like everything she's saying, trying to be just like her, because wow, it's so inspiring. And I didn't feel I had that inside of me for whatever reason. I had a very strong mom. So, this conversation is like on multiple levels, Victoria, because my mom was really, really, really strong. And she didn't see herself that way. She saw herself as, very small. And my dad was the big one. But no,
Mm.
she was, are you kidding? I felt like I didn't have a place to stand, because it was always my mom. My mom was so strident and so sure of her perspective. And so, out there and just sharing and confident and, speaking her mind and feisty. And I was like this little empathic ball of like goo that was like, I don't know what to do with this, like, oh, it's
Yeah.
so intimidating, and
Yeah.
like I just kind of wanted the mom that would like bake me milk and cookies and like stroke my back, and tell me it's all gonna be okay. And I got this feisty mom. And I'm pretty sure my kids feel the same way. But both of them had the same father, but like, they turned out really different too. And one of them's like, just kind of off on his path and, doing his thing and being successful. And the other one is like calling me every day and like really needs some extra support and love and guidance. And, and I'm helping him to find his own, hey, you got it, you got it. And,
Yeah.
your life doesn't look like your brother's. It's okay. Your life is very different, but what do you want for yourself? And I find myself in this position only because I've walked that journey of being so like, literally people probably watch me on this broadcast and go, no, you can't possibly have ever not had confidence. And it's like, oh no. If I projected it, it's because I was so insecure, right? I was so afraid people would see behind to the gooey center, where I never really felt like I could take up space.
Yeah.
It's just like that. I feel like when you've gone through that, experience, or when you've gone through trauma, it actually helps you to be more receptive to other people, or more maybe in tune with where like they're holding back because they're maybe putting you on a little hero worship because they see something about you that's already in them, but they can't see it in themselves yet. And so it's like I feel like our role sometimes is simply to support a person to see, no, you're only seeing the light reflection. You're only seeing in me what's already in you, but you haven't owned it yet. And so my job is to help you own it so you can fully stand in it. And then you're like the one shining because you're being yourself, right? And you have a place, you have a birthright, you have a place to take up space, and that you should, because your gifts are needed, right? I mean, I feel like that's our role. I just went off on a whole tangent, but what do you think about that?
No, no, I agree. And I don't know if you'll agree with this or not, but what I often will tell people, and I do a lot of like coaching and mentorship, many of whom are like, like early entrants into the career, like new graduates, often women. And I say, I'm not a fan of fake it till you make it, except when it comes to confidence. I said that's the one place I want you to like more like
Mm.
fake it till you become it or you believe it. And with that, and that's where I think to what you're talking about, Kerri, they're like, but I see this in you and I want, and I'm like, but this super confident woman that does love herself, I am proud of myself today, didn't always. But actually, I can also say I look back and I think about my first executive role came at 24 years
I
old.
know, I can't even imagine
Um,
that. 24.
but I think a big part of that was because even though I was not truly confident internally, I don't think I was in a full state of loving myself yet, but I showed up. That's the one place where the mask was very helpful. I showed up with this extreme amount of confidence. And so telling people that is a little bit of, like you say, just sort of shining the light on them. They're like, what? Really? Like you weren't always like this? Or like even the fact that there's a lot of people who, are much more introverted and like, yes, I stand on stages. And I'm like, first of all, you don't have to be an extrovert to do those things. But also, I wasn't always like this. Like it's baby steps. And so I just like letting people know that this version they see now, like it's an evolution. And there's steps you can take to get there. But just recognize, like you said, sort of the nuggets that you've got inside of yourself, like that, can help you get there.
Yeah. And I think there's been a lot in the spiritual community, there's been a lot of dialogue around like, burn all the gurus and, destroy all the teachers. They're all dishonest. It's like once you find out somebody's human, they're like, which is why I think it's really important as a spiritual guide. You got to be like, or a mentor or a guide or anything like what you're doing, Victoria. You got to be so vulnerable and transparent. It's like, this is where I am today, but like, I didn't start there. And not only that, but I'm not 100% healed. Like we learn through experience, right? And so how we handle our own mistakes, I think is equally as important. What do you think really works for like leaders who, you find yourself in a mistake or you find yourself in maybe a projection field, an accusation? It's like, it's such a tricky spot, right? Because you don't want to, I don't want to dismiss, especially if it's a woman that's just coming into her power. I don't want to dismiss her intuition because I'm like working to help them have intuition, right? And to trust it. But then when it's projected on you, it's kind of like, oh, I don't really think that's true about me, but like maybe it is. And then there's these moments where you got to walk this really fine line of like supporting someone in their intuition to really know what they, because they're practicing, right? And a lot of times we practice where it's safe with somebody that we know isn't going to trash us, throw us under the bus, call us crazy. And so we're often put in that position of like, of navigating that. How do you do that? How do you help people through that?
I am here's a case of where I had to say like now I believe it, but like do as I say, not as I do. And that is around giving yourself permission to fail. I've told people that forever, yet in my 20s, I don't think I really gave myself permission to fail. I was my harshest critic. But I do believe that now. But again, I think that's maturity and lots of failure and learning from failure. So, it's like again, as a leader, it's like making it okay, creating a safe place. But then it goes back to like, so that self-reflection again, like how did I get here? How did I make this mistake? Did I operate purely from intuition and I didn't have enough facts? Did I not consult with people who had a history who may have been able to inform me of what some of the outcomes could have been? Was it maybe it's circumstances that were outside of my control? And that's okay, but like let's sit with this and understand how it happened so that we can learn from it for the next time. And I'll always say like own it as well. Like own the mistake, and be confident in talking about what you've learned from it and how you're going to prevent it from moving forward. And I also again I think it builds great trust. And it's sort of an extension of that also for me is to acknowledge I don't know what I don't know. Like I don't make stuff up just for the sake of it. Like I've been in professional services consulting. I'd rather tell a client, I don't know. I don't have the answers right now, but I have a team. I'm going to consult. I'm going to get it. I'm going to come back. Then like just making stuff up and then potentially being proven wrong. And then there's a lack of trust as a result of that. So again, that's a level of confidence to be able to go, I don't know what I don't know right now, but I'm going to get the answers.
Yeah, that ability right there is exactly what the initiation in teenagehood is meant to do. Because the IQ, the mind, if it's construction is to protect itself, right? It's to defend itself. And the hardest thing to sit with is not knowing. Like the
Mhm.
hardest thing is not knowing and to be able to say, I don't know. I'm not sure. I need to reflect on that. That's maturity. That only happens after that initiation. And so some people are getting that initiation through work, like through somebody like you. They're showing they never had the initiation, right? And so they're showing up at work at 45 and you're like you become their manager and you're like, "Oh, well, actually, let me help you through this." And they're getting it through the workplace or they're going on a shamanic retreat and they're getting it through shamanic initiation. So like if somebody's got to at some point in a person's life, in order to get out of that sort of mental defense place, that polarized thinking, you have to have somebody that's going to willingly to be that mirror for you to demonstrate it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to be wrong. Here's what you do to repair. Here's what repair looks like. Here's what, conversation about different perspectives looks like. Here's how you hold yourself when someone's attacking you and here's how you not attack back. Like this is like you actually need a leader to demonstrate that to you. And these people, whoever holds that is invaluable for our society. It's like stepping into that elder position. And you were like already beginning your journey with it at 24, which is kind of amazing. But like you said, we learn as we go. Like we start off with one set of skills, like I can project confidence. And then along the way, behind that mask is like, oh shit, I don't know what to do here, and like, how do I solve
Yeah.
this problem? And like, and you're working it, you're puzzling it all the way along. And when your mind is flexible and life is a frontier to be explored, you're much more well equipped to do that than when your telomeres are super short in your brain and you can't like accept anybody else's perspective, then you get stuck right in a rut. Like it's like it just goes down to nowhere. It's a trail to go nowhere but exactly what you think. And that's social media unfortunately is reinforcing those right those patterns in the mind that get you trapped down in a tunnel of like no other perspectives
Yeah.
but your own echo chambers, I think they call them.
Yeah, I'd say a few things on that too. I think that's one, why I think it's so important to, build relationships outside of the digital realm because people see the filtered, positive views of what's happening on social versus the real struggle that it's taken for people to achieve the success we're seeing. And they're generally not talking about the struggles on the way. Some do. So I think this is why, like, I'm an avid networker, always have been. Even though there are so many days I do not feel like getting out and going to network after the end of a very long day. I know the real human connection face to face is like no other. And so I like really encourage people to just be building those relationships in real life. The other thing I'd say is I think it's really important for as leaders, as you gain this experience, you learn from the mistakes you've made to be like actively working to become coaches, mentors, and sponsors of others in the workplace.
Mm.
Because there's people who, as you said, they don't know what they don't know. And so like just go, hey, let me like share this with you. And I think there's some leaders who grasp onto that, like institutional knowledge and experience, like incredible power. And for me, I try and approach it from a place of generosity and not greed. And so I'm going to share with you my experience. I'm going to like go, oh my God, don't make this mistake. Here's what I did. Here's what it looked like. And like just providing that coaching and mentorship. But that's an investment of time. And so for me, I don't see that as secondary to what in a workplace to the work. That is integral into my work. Being a coach, being a formal mentor or sponsor to someone in the organization is not extra work. That is my role as a leader. And I've chosen that's who I am and as a human. So I take that outside of the workplace into boards I sit on, the community, like advisory boards. And so I network with intention, but I do it from a place of generosity and not greed and sharing my knowledge and experience. And I think there's such power. And I think poor leaders view that power for themselves versus the power of sharing that much more, holistically with others.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's lots of books written about this, like where you're either going to hire the people that are smarter than you, or you're going to hire, because you want to be in power or the smartest person in the room, you hire and you keep people suppressed so that you can maintain this sort of like artificial power structure. I feel like obviously being a gardener means helping the garden grow. I think if we just think of ourselves as gardeners, and then it's so exciting when the garden starts to grow. It's like, wow, I love it. That's my favorite part. I don't know about you, but that's my favorite part of mentoring is like when I see somebody like all of a sudden they stir in their power. I mean, even if it means like I know my decision and I'm not ready for this right now and I'm not moving it to the next level. And I'm like, okay, yeah, that's awesome. I'm not going to doubt you on that. That's your thing, right? Like that's your truth right now. And then, maybe a few months later they want to like circle back in for something else. But like that I've realized at first I used to take that really personal. Like, what do you mean? Like I had this whole structure in place for you. Like I was going to lead you to the level 1 and then level 2 and then level 3 and then you were going to loop in for this. And I had to learn like, no, Kerri, like I have a structure just so I have a place to lead people, but they get to choose to get on the train or not get on the train.
Yeah.
And like the most important thing I can do is validate their decision. Like, this is what's true for you right now. This is what's right for you right now. I honor your decision. You're absolutely right for yourself. And I'm going to miss you. And maybe they'll circle back in later, but I had to learn that. It's hard to learn that, it's hard to let go of, your idea and realize there's like all these other ideas going on. And if you really want to grow a garden, you need all of the other ideas because they're
Yeah.
adding things you didn't even know you wanted until it shows up, So
Yeah.
powerful.
It is. It
Gosh,
is.
that's why diversity is important. It's because we don't know what we don't know, even if we're
Right.
leaders. Maybe we're not leading it in quite the right direction. And we would have never known that unless somebody in our team spoke up and said, hey, I see something you're not seeing.
Agree. So I've chosen now because of unfortunately how like the politics around it all. Instead of talking like it's less about like diversity of the things we talked about, gender, religion, race, sexuality, and just like let's look about diversity of thought, diversity of experience. like recognize that exactly as you've described it, someone who, has worked in a different country, different industry, different teams, they're going to see things we didn't because we didn't have that experience. So like I've shifted to talking about it that way in certain contexts. Don't get me wrong, though, if you read some of my LinkedIn posts, I'm still very actively talking about diversity in the ways in which, I've been doing for decades. But in certain places where I want it to continue to be supported, I talk about it that way because there's just so much power in, like, I mean, there's innovation and like problem solving like that happens when you just have like diversity, period. So I embrace it. I love it. It's part of the reason I grew up in a smaller Western Canadian town that didn't have a ton of diversity. When I got relocated to Toronto, which is like the smaller, cleaner version of New York, and there was all this diversity. Like I thrived. I loved it within it, and was very happy to raise my kids there.
Yeah, I love it too. I love diver. It makes me happy. Yeah, when I go out, and I live in Texas now, and I've lived here for 2005. And when I first came here, well, even before I came here, my parents moved here first, and there was like dirt roads, and there was hardly anybody here. And now it's like all developed and everything. But when I go to my like favorite place with my mom, it is so diverse in there. It's like I'm like, yes. Like I feel like, like there's something beautiful happening here, and just all the different life experiences, the different perspectives, the different ancestry, the different, everything. It's like so beautiful to see that garden grow and like to learn from each other. And we just elected, I think, the first woman from India, like to our city council. And I was like, yes, I love this, because she's got, she showed up my door and she knocked on my door, and I was like, as soon as I saw her eyes, it was like I had this soul connection. It's like,
Yeah,
like that, this connection with, I don't even know why I know you already, but I do. And I felt her heart, and I was like, okay, you're my person.
I
So
love it.
love you so much. So, well, great. Thank you so much for coming on. This is, yeah, you're definitely dynamic. That's for sure. I mean, you are who you say you are. I mean, yeah, you can just tell somebody's, I mean, as an energy intuitive, as an empathic, as a sensitive person that can feel things. What I'm really sensitive to is incongruencies in the field.
Mm.
And so like, I always interview people before I interview them. You guys know that about me. And so Victoria and I had a couple conversations already, and I was like, feeling sussing out, and I'm like, okay, she's coming from here, she's coming from there, okay, I want to include this conversation, how are we going to do that? And it's because I need to feel it. That's how I am. I have to feel someone to know, like, okay, are there incongruencies? And I gotta say, like, you're pretty spot on congruent with your message. And from my perspective, and of course everybody else, your sort of intuition on that is your own to have, so don't just take it from me. You got to do your own work. So, how do people get started with you? Because I know you do so many things. I know you work for a lot of companies, and I mean, I don't know who knows who's listening to this podcast. I mean, I know a lot of spiritual people are, but who knows where they work or what they do?
Yeah.
How do you fit into their lives?
Well, so I mean, the easiest way for them to find and connect with me is I have a website, which is victoria-pelletier.com. I'm sure that they don't need to figure out how to spell that. It'll be in your show notes. But from there, they can connect with me, whether it's on LinkedIn or the other socials, to learn about the work that I do around coaching, my public speaking, the books, et cetera. Whatever resonates with them, I'd love to connect.
Awesome. And I recommend you guys do connect with Victoria, because she's fantastic. I've really enjoyed our connection. I hope this isn't the last time we talk. And I want to just welcome everybody to just take a deep breath. Let all the messages from today sink in. And I'm going to give you kisses. I always give people kisses at the end of the show. And so here come your Reiki kisses, your kisses of love. Please like, subscribe, share, and share this out with anybody that you think could use this message or would really like Victoria. And yeah, here we go. Here are your kisses. Love you all so much. Thank you for agreeing to be on Earth at this time of the Great Awakening. And we'll see you next time on Soul Nectar Show. Bye for now.
If you found even one gold nugget in this episode of Soul Nectar Show, will you do us a favor? Will you subscribe, like, and share this episode? Maybe even write a comment and let us know what you thought about it. We really, really want to engage with you. at a much deeper level. Let's be part of community together. Have a great week, everyone. Bye for now.
Soul Nectar Show. Awaken, awake to show. Take a sip from the drip of nectar from the source of who you are.